This driver head is supposed to give you so much extra distance, it's illegal. What's happening, Panda Nation? Peter Von Panda here. I am holding in my hand, for the first time ever, a Krank driver. This is by Krank Golf, and this is kind of an interesting driver, and I was desperate to check this out. Now, Krank actually is known for making really long distance drivers, long distance competitions. They are fun to watch if you've never watched them before, but they stay in business by selling a consumer driver, and it looks pretty aggressive. It's kind of like the Lamborghini Aventador of drivers. It's just a cool looking driver. It's all titanium, and they make a handful of drivers for the average golfer like you and me. Now, what they also make here recently is something that they call the X driver. Now, this is their latest driver, Formula 11, and it's got one big X on the bottom, and that means that this is a high-core driver. They actually make a double X, which is a high-core driver. Now, core is coefficient of restitution, and what that basically means is that the face of a driver can only have a certain amount of springiness. As the ball hits it, the face can flex and fire that ball back. Now, a thin face has more of that trampoline effect, but there's a couple issues with that. One, you can't make it so thin, or you can't add so much trampoline effect that it gets beyond the legal limit, USGA limit at least. And you can't make it so thin that repeatedly beating on it will break the face too. Now, titanium is very, very strong, but it certainly can happen, especially after multiple impacts. And the X is the first tier of that. It's actually meant for people who typically drive 200 to 260 yards. If you drive 200 yards or less, the double X is for you, because that's a super high core. And so what is really cool about this is I thought, well, can I just get some extra yardage out of this head, right? Can I just swap out my heads? This is actually cheaper than a lot of big OEM brands, and will it go farther? Now, as I mentioned, the core limits are determined by USGA, I believe. So if you are playing in tournament or officially sanctioned competitive golf, then you have to use USGA approved equipment. But if you are just playing for fun, if you are just someone who is getting frustrated by losing distance and you just want as much distance as possible, for example, my parents have kind of fooled around a little bit with golf, but it's frustrating because they're not very good. Something like this, because it's really high core, might give them some distance to just enjoy the game more. So that's why I was interested in this, and I thought if it's really far, that'd be fun to just go out and play a casual round with some friends and just hit some bombs off the tee, baby. Dropping balls way out there, 400, 500 yards. All right, so anyway, I ordered this because generally I will hit a little farther than 200 yards, so this X, the first version here, seemed like it was for me. So I ordered this, and what you get is this head here, which has this cool angular shape. It's not a real soft shape, you know, real flowing organic. It's got kind of this high toe. As you can see, it has these little louvers on there. In the description, it says that they're for structural rigidity, but I think they are there for looks. Even the paint here is kind of racy, these white stripes up there. And then there's no molded in shapes. That's really kind of a stamped in Formula F11, and then it's just paint filled. So there's nothing really ornate about this, but I just love the no nonsense looks. Again, there is no thin ply carbon fiber anywhere. The whole head is titanium, which honestly I do like too. I get that using exotic materials allows you to move the weight to where you want it, usually low and center, but what you do have here are two 5-gram weights. They do not seem to be interchangeable with any of the other weights that I have from Callaway or TaylorMade or anything, but they are removable. They do seem to be pretty standard size for smaller, more micro brand. So my Lightspeed driver head weights actually screw in there. So it's just a cool looking head. Actually, the hosel here is Callaway adapter sleeve compatible. So if you have a Callaway adapter on there, you can certainly use that. It actually comes with its own adjustable hosel, which has 3 different settings that you can control, and actually might be the best hosel I've ever seen. And it's funny because it's not from a big OEM. Now, what are my experiences with this? Well, this is kind of an interesting story. So I played around with it and it worked out just fine. You know, I didn't really notice any big differences with it. So I took it to the driving range and I used my launch monitor to get some real data, and I hit a lot of shots because I was really hoping to get some extra distance with this. And I would tell you what, after a lot of shots with both this versus my TaylorMade Sim 2 Max D draw bias driver, I found that this head went 204.14 yards on average, and my TaylorMade went 204.18 yards on average. So there, conclusively done, tested. This does not go any farther than my TaylorMade Sim 2 driver. And in fact, actually after that, I was a little disappointed, thinking, wow, it seems like it's a very capable driver, but even in this high-core format here, it doesn't seem to go any farther. But as I started looking into the data a little more, I saw some surprising things. So one of the things that I noticed here was my club head speed was down on this driver. Now, the club head speed on the Krank was 87.9 miles per hour on average, and my club head speed with my TaylorMade Sim 2 Max D was 91.8 miles an hour on average. And I was actually thinking, well, maybe the Krank here is actually a little heavier. Maybe it's just slowing down my speed. So I threw them both on the scale, and they are both effectively about the same. So one is not heavier than the other. Now, I was using the same shaft and the same adapter on both. I was using that all-fit universal adapter so that I could swap these back and forth. So really the only thing that was different here is the head. Now, you could say maybe it's aerodynamics, maybe it's the shape of it. I think it just comes down to the fact that I don't have as much play time with this, even though that really shouldn't matter, and I felt pretty comfortable with it. I think it's just a matter of it feels a little different because it's an all titanium head. It feels like the weight is a little further out on the toe. It just takes a little bit of getting used to. The type of swing that I use with the TaylorMade might be just a little bit different, and I think that ultimately, because the weights are the same, I think that over more use that my club head speeds would be exactly the same with these two. Now, that being said, what I think was interesting is that even though I was getting slower club head speeds with the Krank here, I was getting the same total distance as with the TaylorMade. So what that means is actually this Krank driver per mile per hour was going farther than my TaylorMade. Now, not by a lot, but the club head speed here was about 4% lower, netting me the same distance. So does this actually work? Well, I certainly wouldn't say that this high-core is delivering me 10 or 20 plus more yards. And if I were getting 4 additional mile per hour on the club head speed with this over time, that would actually result in 6 additional mile per hour on the ball speed, which could lead to 12 to 18 more yards. So is it possible to get it? Yes. And would my initial data suggest that it's possible? Well, I definitely think that's a possibility, although I wasn't getting it. I think part of that is you just have to get more hang time on it and use it a little bit more and get more comfortable with it so that you can get your max, so that you can perform at your max to get the max out of the Krank. So really interesting little driver here. I was actually really bummed at the beginning because I thought, hey, it's not delivering at all. There's no way to know if this is really high core. But like I said, when I dove into the data, it certainly seems like there is some potential here. So if you want to pick up a Krank driver, maybe enjoy the game more by getting some added distance. Maybe you're not competing in any types of tournaments like me, and you just want to have fun on the course, then this could be the answer. And not only do you get this driver head, but you also get this really cool head cover, Krank Golf. It looks like an arrow, but that's the one side of a K and then the G right there. And it's a really nice head cover too. And so you get this as well, and you can buy it in just the component head. So if you go to their website, you can just buy this with their adapter sleeve and the head cover, or if you want them to build you a full-on custom golf club, you can do that too. So you can get what you need from there. I'll put the links to Krank Golf in the description below. Peter Von Panda, out.
If you wanna know about a brand, ask me. I'll check if what's in the bag's nasty. Better if you know what's up than the unhappy. I know what it feels like when you're done cashing. They tried their meal or drive their vehicle, garbage delivered at your PO. I know you feel you wanna scream, your head hurts on your pillow.
Discover more.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Explore deeper.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Live better.